Villainous Heroics by I Believe in a Happily Ever After on AO3. Chapter 4. Do you think Eraserhead's just a tsundere? The simultation realization in question came to Hisashi in a fit of brilliance as he laid on his apartment floor and thought about the last few fights he had with the hero in mind. I mean, his smiles kind of make me think he's about to kill me and all, but he fits the personality type, don't you think? He doesn't care about what anyone thinks, but then he worries about when he breaks my glasses and jokes around during fights, sometimes. Hisashi has known from the start that Eraserhead hadn't had the best public image, if any public image at all. He had known because he has always known Eraserhead before he set about becoming a villain. Aizawa was an underground hero, yes, but he was still a hero. The world always had its eyes trained on heroes, hidden or not. Maybe he really does like me back, and he's just playing it cool until the right time. But then, when would the right time be? I mean, it's not like anyone would know if he started dating a villain, right? Barely anyone knows about him besides people like me. That, at least, was the utter truth. Eraserhead was a known name only to those who lived in rough areas like where Hisashi did, and it didn't matter if the person was villain, thug, or civilian. When forced to live in the shadows and always watch your back, it was hard to not know about the ones who did good. The area Hisashi lived in was utter shit, with old buildings, poor funding, and a police station that didn't care about any of them unless they had to please some higher ups. News always started with the latest tragedy that happened overnight and ended with a list of those missing. It was depressing, and once someone lived in these types of areas, it was near impossible to get out. Then, the news had one day started with a story about how two women had been saved by an unknown hero who dressed in black clothing and used some kind of scarf as a weapon while hidden behind yellow goggles. It's not fair that no one knows about the good he does. I get that he's an underground, but that doesn't mean I can't help give him a good image. If that takes 3 different fan accounts, making my own hero merch, and making stupid online videos, then so be it. A lot of which he did was just to give him a distraction when his thoughts became too loud for even him. But Hisashi liked to think that his constant social media presence screaming about the good of pro hero Eraserhead was at least doing some good. Hey, I didn't start all this villain stuff just to meet Eraserhead, you know. I did it for more reasons than that. He had been waiting for some uncaring, high on life pro hero to show up that night of his debut so he could make a point. But instead of anyone he had expected, he had been captured in a heartbeat by a scowling man who made sure all civilians were safe, out of the way before giving President Mike any attention. I can still multitask, though, don't you think? Tilting his head back to face the one he had been talking to, Hisashi frowned. A small, white paw landed on his forehead, a loud meow echoing around his dingy apartment. There was a moment of silence, and then Hisashi felt the hint of claws against his skin. If you claw me, then it's dry food, only for the next week. Snowball, and you know I keep my promises. The claw receded, and Hisashi gave a light grunt as his cat, far too large for having been such a tiny, half-drowned kitten a few months ago, jumped onto his chest and settled down. Thank you for your wise words. The meow Snowball gave sounded smug. Hisashi both hated and loved it. Maybe I'm thinking about this too deeply. Do you think I'm focusing too much on Eraserhead? It had been a couple months now, after all, and Hisashi had yet to see another pro hero in his area, underground or otherwise. As wonderful as Aizawa was, and as much as Hisashi wanted a date with the man, he had to remember his goal. He had to prove just how broken the system of heroes and villains were. A buzz from his phone had startled him out of his thoughts, Hisashi digging it out before seeing that it was an update on the underground hero Eraserhead forums he had joined. a moment of debate, he unlocked his screen and tried not to grin. It wouldn't hurt to take a bit longer on a break, and considering he had nothing present to do, Hisashi supposed he could stand to think about Aizawa just a little bit longer. Welcome to Lovely Coffee. Oh, whoa, you look awful. Hisashi had seen Aizawa a dozen of times since the first day he had wandered into the shop he worked into, but he hadn't seen him look this bad. The man always looked a few moments away from falling asleep, but right now he looked like he was on the verge of total collapse. Aren't you supposed to be nicer to your customers? Yes, but what they had was special. Of course, Hisashi couldn't say that without being found out as Present Mike. And not only would that get him fired, but that would also mean he could never hide from Aizawa again. Mostly, though, he just needed to make his rent this time. I'll have my usual. I think I'm legally obliged to stop you from having so many espresso shots. You look like you died, and then someone with a reanimation quirk brought you back to life. There was a half moment where Hisashi saw Aizawa almost smile before he glared at him. Thankfully, Hisashi was near immune to those glares after so much exposure. Will you at least please order something to eat with your coffee order this time? No, I don't like eating in the mornings. Aizawa grumbled, words quieter than they normally were. The man was a pretty quiet person, of course, but this was too quiet. You used to always order those cute cat muffins we made here before we stopped making them? Hisashi complained, staring at the coffee, always as Aizawa dug out his money. Yes, then you stopped making them. Yeah, because the boss and owner of the store was an utter cheapskate. I'll be fine. No offense, but you really don't look like you'll be fine. Hisashi added only one espresso shot this time, knowing it would be enough to get the man through into lunch, and maybe, hopefully, he would collapse somewhere and get some sleep. Did you take on too much at work or something? You're nosy. Ah, his dear Eraserhead was blunt as always. Hisashi supposed it probably did look strange in how curious he was. And no, it's just been noisy outside my apartment. Aizawa must have sensed he was ready to start up a new line of questioning because he snorted as he took his coffee. Construction work. They'll be done by next week. Oh, well, I was going to offer my help, but I can't really do much about that. He couldn't, at least. President Mike, on the other hand? Are you sure you don't want a blueberry muffin or anything? They're my favorite, personally, but the apple cinnamon is pretty good. Oh, the banana stone is great with the black coffee. You talk a lot. Once again, blunt as always. At least the words were familiar ones in his life. Thanks for the coffee. Oh, yeah, of course. Hisashi did his best not to swoon, but this was the first time Aizawa had ever actually thanked him like that. He was absolutely in love. Hopefully, Aizawa would be, too, once President Mike showed him just what he could do. And, thankfully, that turned out to be a lot. It had taken a night of careful following, not stalking, to figure out where Aizawa lived. Of course, it had taken no time at all for Hisashi to steal all the keys to the construction vehicles and hold them hostage from the workers. Half of them seemed to want to beat the shit out of him, but Hisashi was amused by the older ones who just took an early lunch. There were spare keys and other type of equipments to deal with, of course, and running any time the police were brought in. But Hisashi prevailed in the end. Well, really, he supposed he ended up delaying process so much that management agreed to stop in the late evenings and pick back up in the morning. The workers looked pleased enough to hear that they would no longer be working nights, though, and Aizawa wouldn't have to deal with the loud noises anymore, so Hisashi called it a success. His attempts to bring back his coffee shop's cat muffins were also a success. In a way. President Mike had threatened his boss, which had felt wonderful, but Hisashi himself was the one who had to show up an hour or two early each shift to now make the muffins. At least they sold well to people besides just Aizawa, he mused. It had all worked out wonderfully well, and Hisashi was sure he had gotten away with it all until he found himself hanging upside down from where he was tied up with Aizawa's capture scarf and dangling from a lamppost. "Oh, Racer! I haven't seen you in ages," Hisashi greeted cheerfully, trying not to let himself get motion sickness as he swung back and forth. "I've missed you." "Stop it." Before he could speak again, Aizawa was talking over him. "Why did you stop the construction?" "Come on now, Racer. You know, as my greatest enemy, you have to be at the top of your game to defeat me." Alright, Hisashi may have put a bit too much force and cheer into his words as he swinged in the hold, entire world moving around him. He was finding that he didn't like being upside down. "Could you at least put me on the ground? Please?" "No. Did you follow me home? Don't answer. Of course you did. You could have cost a lot of people their jobs, you know." "And I should care? I am a villain, you know." There was no need for Aizawa to know that Hisashi had worried about that, and had upped his presence at the construction site so management would have no excuse to blame the workers for their delays. Besides, the sounds annoyed me whenever I wanted a nightly stroll. "You threatened a coffee shop." Yes, well, he supposed. At the core of it all, he did threaten the coffee shop. Before he could defend himself, he squealed as he fell a few inches in the air, Aizawa stopping his descent just before his head hit the ground. "Was that necessary?" Hisashi winced as he could hear his squirk at the edge of his words. He quickly forced it down, trying to keep his words even. "And I just had a friendly chat with them." "No more friendly chats. The workers there actually make decent coffee, and it's on my way to my other job." Aizawa sounded uncaring, but Hisashi knew that he was complimenting his coffee skills. His heart could tell. Besides, it was all worth it where Aizawa seemed a lot more perked up and well rested, or at least as close to it as he could get. His eyes were still bloodshot and there were still bags under his eyes, but he looked better by leaps and bounds since the first time Hisashi had noticed. He supposed the constant exhaustion was explained by the reveal of his other job. Hisashi mused. "Tell you what, hero." Hisashi cooed out the last word in English, grinning at the glare he was given in return. "I'll make a deal with you." "You've been trying to capture me for months, and I've punched you more times than you could probably count," Aizawa grumbled, voice irritated. Hisashi let the silence sit, trying not to grin when the man sighed. "What's the deal?" "I won't do any villainy for the next week in exchange for a kiss from you," Hisashi said simply, almost laughing as he saw shock on the other's face. He had seen Aizawa surprised, of course, but he had never seen him shock. "What do you say, hero?" His answer came in a form of sudden loss of gravity. Hisashi shrieked as he hit the ground and landed on his back, groaning as the world settled down around him, and Aizawa walked up to him without quite making eye contact. "As if I would ever kiss you." Hisashi had been right. Aizawa was a tsundere. Cracking his eyes open, Hisashi felt his pain lessened when he saw the edges of what could have been maybe a smile on Aizawa's face. It disappeared, of course, but it still had been nice to see. Aizawa shook his head with a heavy sigh before speaking. "And what villainy? You aren't even a real villain." "What? Yes, I am. I pull off heists and crimes all the time." Just because he didn't recklessly attack people doesn't mean he wasn't a villain. "Oi, oi. Do you even know how to get labeled as a villain?" Aizawa kneeled beside him, not worried about Hisashi fighting back, considering he was still wrapped under his capture scarf. He couldn't even wiggle. "A villain is labeled after repeated use of their quirk in public spaces for nefarious purposes." "I do nefarious things in public spaces," Hisashi defended, as quick as he could, knowing it was a losing battle, as all the others had been. "You don't use your quirk," Aizawa said simply. Hisashi, well, Aizawa had a point. He didn't use his quirk. At least, Not in his villain work. He used it in self-defense when he needed to, but he couldn't just go around using his quirk all the time. It was dangerous. Who says I need to use my quirk to cause trouble? Hizashi shot back. While Eraserhead may have been the only hero he liked, and Aizawa was a decent person, he didn't get to sit there and lecture Hizashi like he was some misbehaved kid. I can just be as dangerous without it. Dangerous? Aizawa raised an eyebrow, looking amused. You're just loud. No, he wasn't. It's noisy, but it's not that bad. Liar. Hisashi knew his quirk could do it. It was dangerous. It was dangerous. It might as well have been a villain's quirk. Come on, police station. I didn't even do anything tonight, Hisashi whined, not fighting as he was pulled to his feet and properly cuffed. Disturbing construction work and threatening the owner of a store is a crime. You know, and those two you haven't been charged for yet. Didn't even get my kiss, Hisashi grumbled to himself, not fighting too much as he was dragged away. As nice as it was of Aizawa to try and save him, there was little point to it. Hisashi would have to prove just how pointless it was, and show Eraserhead just how much of a threat President Mike could be. First, though, he needed to remember to call his boss and let him know he'd be running late for work. Being a villain was exhausting, he was finding. So, I hear you're the new villain stirring up trouble around here. Startling at the hand that touched his shoulder, Hisashi carefully glances to his left to see a man who looked entirely unassuming and had a polite, neutral smile that would be well suited for someone in business marketing. Nice to see my name is getting out there. Spinning around in his chair, Hisashi put on a dazzling smile as he took a quick scan of the room. The club he was at in that night was a busy one, and so the music was covering up their voices nicely, drowning them out to anyone who would be trying to listen. The path to the door was obscured by a crowd of moving and dancing bodies, and at least 3 people were casting glances over to them. All of them looked like they could fight. Oi, if you know I'm a villain, shouldn't you be running away? On the contrary, you see, I'm someone who likes to help aspiring people such as yourself reach their lofty goals. The man's voice was average. Everything about him was average. It was so wrong. This man was dangerous, and that much Hisashi knew for certain. Tell me, President Mike, what are you in the business for? I need a reason to have a little fun? Hisashi laughed loud and bright, trying to keep his posture loose and relaxed, even as he shifted his weight around so he could run if he needed to. I got bored. No one becomes a villain just by being bored, President Mike. This one was too smart. He didn't like it. I have an offer for someone with a quirk like yours. You need someone to do some screaming? Hisashi said, tilting his head in a flinged cluelessness as he tried to calm his racing heart. Not many knew what his quirk was, and for good reason. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who can scream. Not like you can. Your quirk would be adventurous to see those I work with, if you're willing to hear more. Ah, villain's quirk. And what makes you think I'd want anything to do with those you work with? Hisashi hid his fear, as he always done, putting up a pout and pinching his voice into something whiny and childish. He had a feeling his mask didn't work in front of this man. Let's just call it belief. The words were nearly lost in the thundering of laughter and singing and screaming in the air, the bass drumming out a rhythm that Hisashi mirrored in his tapping of his fingers. We'd be willing to help you in return, of course. Help, huh? Who says I need any help? Before he could move away, a business card with something attached to it was slipped inside his jacket pocket. Well, we could all use a little help. How would you like to make that quirk of yours stronger? Stronger? Like hell he wanted that. His quirk was already strong enough to bring down buildings if he wasn't careful. Look! A wild scream from behind had him turning around quickly. Hizashi sighed in relief when he saw it was just someone who couldn't hold their drink and had fallen to the floor. Looking back to the man, Hizashi blinked as he saw the person who he had been watching them were gone. Help? Huh? Turning back around in his chair, Hizashi carefully pulled out the card with a napkin his drink had been resting on, wary of touching something that could have been laced with who knows what. It took a few moments, but he managed to see that it looked like some plain old business card that was wide enough to shine it in the dim lights of the club. On one side was a number, and on the other was a single word, along with what looked like a settling piece of candy at first glance. Looking over the word, Hisashi frowned as he shoved the card back into his pocket. A stronger quirk. Trigger. Huh. He had a bad feeling about that. Oh my god. I love this series. I think this is one of my favorite series. Like, my favorite. I always have a favorite series, right? Before this one, it was Mockingbird and Lyrebird. Now it's obviously Villainous Heroics. Before those two, though, my favorite was Cheat Code Support Strategist by Clouds, Man in the Clouds Not Coming Down. But I always have a favorite. I hope you know, those who do multiple podfics at a time, like for example, Kat, yeah, no, they have a favorite too. It's like parents, like, oh, you have multiple children? I don't have a favorite. I love you all equally. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's BS. It's BS if I ever tell you guys, I love all my podfics equally. No, I don't. There's ones that I absolutely loathe and despise. I'm joking. I like them all. It's just I don't like them all equally. You know, like, I love doing all of them. There's just some I prefer doing more than others. Like, for example, Villainous Heroics, I really enjoy because the fanfic itself is really good. I really like it, right? It's funny, it has me laughing, it has me cackling. Its dynamic is a very interesting dynamic. Also, Hisashi really wants that kiss. Like, I'll stop villainy for like a week if you kiss me, you know? Hee hee, haha. I wouldn't be surprised if we went, you know, and if you marry me, I'll stop it completely. Hell, I'll become a hero. Like, just, you know, putting the cards out there, just so you know, I'd do anything for you, you know. Hisashi, you and me both. We're both that type of person. Of course, I have my limits. Everybody has their limits, right? But, hey, pretty much anything else is on the table. There's just certain things that are off the table, but a lot of things are on the table for the people that I love, right? Like, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked. What labels a villain? Eraserhead mentioned that on what labels a villain and stuff like that, and that is very interesting because it brought into my mind, okay, a villain is someone who poses, like, uses their quirk in a public setting, in a way that poses danger to, like, the civilians or stuff like that, or you know, that's the gist of it, of what I got. What about a quirkless person? Would they not qualify the villain rank, and would they only be considered a criminal? Which, if so, that is something that I'm very interested in, and I might use in my fanfic. Well, not in my fanfic. I don't know if I'm gonna write this alternate version of my fanfic that I was thinking of, but I might not. It's something I'm still thinking about, something still processing, something I'm still seeing if I would be interested in doing it or not, or stuff like that. But it's something that I'm very much interested in because, like, okay, what about villains who are quirkless? Villains who don't even use their quirk, would they still be considered a villain? And if not, what are the repercussions legally wise? Are villains and criminals prosecuted differently? Right? Because I still think they would still be considered criminals, but they would no longer qualify under the villain ranking. So would that make them get a sentencing that's less than someone who has the label of villain? Which is all stuff that's very interesting and that I find interesting. Like, do I think this fanfic is going to touch upon that? Probably not. But it's something that I'm very interested in and I would really much love to see and stuff like that. I also, trigger. Am I worried? Yes. How worried? Yes. Do I think what I think is gonna happen is Hisashi is gonna go to Aizawa like, hey, hi. So this happened. If you kiss me, I'll give you more information. Okay, that's my 2 cents. That's my prediction. Prediction of the week. But yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Join our community Discord server, link is in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.